Yes, and with that, welcome to my presentation again from me. Thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Johanna Bessing, and as Lisa has already told you, I'm studying English and Media Studies, currently in my 8th semester of my bachelor's degree. And today's presentation carries the title, Becoming a Fan, How the Archive of Our Own Shapes the Next Generation of Online Fandom. And Julia's presentation last week also dealt with fandom. That was the first presentation of this blog, but the difference was that her presentation focused on individual fan works and how they are the result of creative productions in their own right. So if someone were to write a fan fiction of a TV show, that fan fiction itself could be the basis for more fanish production. So people might base fan works on other fan works. And what my presentation is about today is what happens when millions of works come together on the same platform. So yeah, the platform in question is the Archive of Our Own. And what Julia discussed is also true for my presentation, but I am less interested in the content that users create than I am in the infrastructures of the platform and how that shapes the user's practices on said platform. So a lot of my presentation will be built on the premise that platforms shape the work that people create on them. So for example, on Instagram, you couldn't just post a text without any sort of image. So the platform forces you to have some sort of visual content in all of your posts. And that is true for every platform. Another example would be Twitter, where there is a character limit, which I think has been extended in the last few months, but you cannot, or at least to my knowledge, you cannot make endlessly long tweets. And that is also the case for this platform. But before I get into more of the specifics, I will show you the definition of fandom in general that I will be going off of. And because this definition defines what types of creative content people will be moved to create if they consider themselves to be part of a fandom. So this quote comes from the platform Fanlaw, which is like Wikipedia but for fan fiction, and as such it is fully user-created. Everyone can add whatever they want. It's not restricted to some sort of grand authority. So the quote says, "A fandom is a community of fans participating in fan act, which means fan activity, and interacting in some way, whether through discussions or creative works. The interaction may be face-to-face at gatherings such as conventions or written communication, either off or online. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, fans of science fiction began using the term to refer to the organized society or culture they were forming. Outside of science fiction fandom, fans may also refer to their own corners of collective fandom simply as fandom. Some also refer to communities around different source materials as individual fandoms. Thus, someone who is multi-fanish, which means a member of several fandoms, might make a list of my fandoms, but also talk about fandom in general as their hobby or way of life. So, for example, someone may say that they are a fandom person, which means that they consider themselves to be engaged in fandom in general, or they might call themselves a member of the Star Wars fandom, which would then be the specific community surrounding that fandom, or even a subsection of Star Wars, like some sort of TV show now on Disney Plus or whatever. It doesn't have to be a big general fandom. And yeah, you are also probably wondering what exactly fan activity is. And those are different community-focused activities. For example, you could be an organizer for a fan convention, something big like Comic-Con, but also something smaller, more focused around a specific community. Or you could be the moderator of a group chat or have a blog where you review movies or books. Even that would sort of fit into that category. But yeah, there is another type of fan activity that is more transformative, which means that fans who engage in this type of activity will create their own works based on the source material itself. This is similar to what Julia showed you last week. And yeah, there are different types of transformative works, which I will just briefly introduce you to. So the most common one will likely be fan fiction. Do any of you here read fan fiction? I think that, yeah, a lot of people know that form. And also fan art is another really popular one. And fan vids, this one is a little less well-known, I think. That is where you make videos based on the source material on podfics. When someone takes a work of fan fiction, usually that person is not the author, and reads it aloud like an audiobook. But the thing all of these types have in common is that the work that is being created is based on some sort of copyrighted material. So you couldn't just take what you have created using all of the character names and their backstories and the plot lines and pretend that it is your own work. So yeah, what makes the work transformative then is that you use the source material in new ways. So for example, you wouldn't just, that is also something that's done. I was going to say that you wouldn't just take a TV show and write it down with the exact same dialogue and actions, but even then you could focus more on different characters' actions or their thoughts. Even that would count, but a lot of the time with fan fiction you will take the characters, put them into new situations, or with fan art as well, and focus on characters that maybe aren't the main focus of the source material. Or another thing that is really common is that people will take two characters who they think seem like they could be in a relationship. Either it is implied by the source material or they just think they look good together. They don't even have to have met in the source material itself. It just has to be interesting to those people. And people will then write fan fiction about those characters put together, or take characters and a plot line and set it in a different world. So for example, if a TV show is set in the 1920s, you could then set that world in the modern world with the same characters and the same storylines and see what changes there. So it can be either analytically motivated, or you may also just want to spend more time with those characters than the source material provides for you. And another big motivation is to spend time with other people who also like this thing, because as this definition of fandom suggests, fandom is based a lot around practices rather than simply existing and liking the same thing as other people. You will often make your enjoyment of that thing clear through specific actions, and in this case, those are transformative works. So, as I've said, they are complete works in their own right, but knowledge of the source material is very, very much beneficial, if not necessary, to properly understand what's going on. And because the work will be based on someone else's intellectual property, creators must not make money from their works. There are cases where that has been done, for example, 50 Shades of Grey, or more recently the book The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Those are both based on fan fiction, but in those cases the names of the characters and their backstories will have to be changed in order for that to work, even though in a lot of cases it is still very much recognizable. I think After is another example. But in order for that to work, you would then have to take the original work, which would have had to be posted on a platform where the author wouldn't make money from it. You would then have to take it down from that website so that people can only buy the book physically, or whatever media it is. If someone makes a TV show based on fan fiction, I don't know, you'd also have to take the work down in that case. And yeah, transformative works, as we know them, originated in the Star Trek community in the 1960s. And so that was well before the internet, but people would send each other in the post at that point stories written about those characters, and a lot of the time about the relationship between Kirk and Spock, which was then not only questionably legal in the copyright infringement sense, but also because that was a gay relationship in the 1960s, that also would have been problematic, and it was a bit of an underground community. And yeah, I will now show you an example of a transformative work, and I thought for the purpose of a presentation, a short 3-minute video might be the easiest option and a lot more logical than showing you part of a fan fiction or fan art, because here you can see a lot more what I mean when I say that the plot is not that easily understandable. So as you will notice, the video uses part of a song and visual material and some quotes from the TV show Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, but it tells a new story that differs from that of the original material. And yeah, without having watched the show, you will likely not understand what is going on, but that is intentional, and that's how you can tell that the work is transformative. And yeah, so because they are cultural products in their own right, they can make sense if you know the source, but they can't really stand alone completely. That's also another thing to keep in mind when someone publishes a fan fiction in novel form. Then they would likely have to insert some more plot into it to make sense of the characters' motivations, because when the people reading it are likely to know what's going on, as is the case with fan fiction, a lot of the time you wouldn't explain everything in total detail because they will have watched or read or whatever the source material. Now for the video, which may work in here or maybe not, and I might have to open YouTube.
Inspector Robinson can be a difficult man to sway.
Well, you seem to have a way with him.
You seem to have some sway over her.
Oh, be careful. Promise me you'll be able to.
Jack, Miss Fisher, you do indeed keep close company these days.
Your breakdown.
What greater force is there than the thwarted love?
It took you away,
Love might.
further from me.
It can bring even the toughest men completely undone.
Sifting through mishaps and photographs,
I see a very
I
careful
think
man
of you much more than I should.
and claims to have no passions in spite of a heart that runs as deep as the Pacific Ocean.
And I'm falling
Your heart is taken.
like it's holy ground. I'm looking for you.
Whoever he is, he's a lucky man.
I'm looking for you again. I'm not letting you go again. I'm not letting this story end. I'm not letting you go again. No.
And to the one as yet unsung hero who has saved me over and over again.
You're right.
All the better for seeing you, Jack. You kissed me,
You kissed me back.
and I'm not here to apologize.
Would you like me to improvise?
More than anything. Come after me.
What did he say?
It's a romantic overture. Come after me, Jack Robinson.
Like it's holy ground. I'm looking for you again. I'm
Did you miss me?
looking for you.
I never get a chance to miss you. It feels as if you're in my office every second day.
Yeah. So would you say that you could make sense of what was going on in that video without having seen the show? Yeah. I think it becomes clear that there is some sort of conflict going on there, but you wouldn't be able to tell, for example, that they are both detectives. He is divorced, and she was in an abusive relationship when she was younger and has since then been hesitant to get into another relationship. And he struggles to be with a woman who is as liberal-minded as she is, and that is where their relationship conflict comes from. But I think you wouldn't be able to just get that from the video. And yes, the platform this lecture is about is entirely filled with works of this kind. The majority of the works posted on the archive of our own are fan fiction, but you can also post fan art on there and embed podfics and videos as well. So even if the work itself exists on an external site like YouTube, you could still put it on there, and people who are on the platform could then comment on it, interact with it, that sort of thing. So there are some original works on there as well, but again, everything that's posted on there is made entirely in someone's personal free time, and they cannot make money from what is on there. So the archive of our own is the largest archive for transformative works. You may also have heard of fanfiction.net, but that website is very outdated these days and has been on the verge of collapse on and off for several years now. And also Wattpad, but that too isn't just for transformative works and isn't really that easy to navigate, I would think. And the archive of our own is amongst the top 100 websites globally, and has over 5.5 million, over 5.5 million registered users, and hosts 10 million transformative works as of May of this year. Anyone can theoretically go on this website and browse their content, but in order to post things on there, you will have to create an account. Have any of you used this platform before? What fandoms do you read, and do you create your own stuff as well? I do talk about my own fandom history later on, so I hope we can be open here, even though I know some people are embarrassed by that. Yeah?
Like too many different fandoms that like I've read so much Star Wars fan fiction. I've never written my own, but I like read something over it like at least once a week.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say something. So those of you who are not familiar with AO3, that's another thing. A lot of people will call the platform AO3 because we've got an A followed by 3 O's, and this is the logo. This is what awaits you when you open the fandom feed of any fandom on the platform, really. The example I have here is BBC Sherlock, which I would assume is one of the most popular on the site, I would say. So each page, this is only a very small screenshot, each page contains 20 of these works, and as you can see, there are 5,000 pages in this fandom, and that screenshot is from March, so there are probably a lot more now. And before you even click on a work, the platform will tell you its name, which in this case is 5 Nights Away from 221B, followed by the creator's username. Below that you get the fandom and a summary down here. And in between we have tags. These will become important later on in the presentation, but just to give you a brief overview now. This at the beginning right here is the warning category. So for example, if the work included a major character dying, which we have here, you would tag that as major character death. The other categories are, I think, graphic depictions of violence, rape, underage, and creator chose not to use archive warnings. So in that case, it could contain something, but maybe for plot reasons or whatever, the author chose not to disclose that. So that means enter at your own risk, essentially. And yeah, then we have the relationship tags. Those are gray. So the slash here means that we have a romantic and or sexual relationship between Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. If we had an ampersand, so an and sign here, that would mean that the relationship would be platonic. Then we have the character tags and different things that tell you what the work is about that wouldn't necessarily be part of the summary. So yeah, some examples here would be first-time blowjobs or the pool scene, but those will be fixed terms that people can type in and then select from, but they can also add anything they want. So for example, I wrote this forever ago. Down here is another one that doesn't really tell you anything about the story. And yeah, here on the right-hand side, you have the filter system where you can filter and search for works based on a lot of different categories. Again, for example, tags, but also, yeah, the categories, like I said, you could filter out all works where someone dies if that's not something you're interested in, and also search by tags. Yeah, so I myself have been in fandom for about 11 years now, and I just wanted to give you this brief overview just to explain how someone develops an academic interest in fandom. So yeah, those are the big 6 major fandoms I've been in, and since 2019 now, I have also been writing fan fiction myself. I've posted about 200,000 words of Miss Fisher's murder mysteries fan fiction at this point, and yeah, that's also when my academic interest in fan fiction began. I discovered the show a few months before graduating from high school, and yeah, my interest in fandom was a big reason of why I chose to major in English and media studies in the first place. And yeah, I wanted to briefly show you then what I have learned in that time. So I've noticed that there appears to be an internal logic that is consistent across all franchises. So apart from the content being different, all fandoms function very similarly from what I've noticed. So there appears to be an internally consistent set of community norms and an awareness of a shared history. What exactly that history is, I will get into a bit later. And yeah, users navigate new fandoms based on their past experiences, thus carrying on the legacy of their previous fandoms. And this passing down of information almost resembles a socialization into fandom from what I've seen, with a mix of people modeling behavior for the younger generations and newer people following it, but also people explicitly talking about how to behave in a fandom, what to do to keep the community alive. That sort of thing also happens on there. And yeah, over the past years, activity in fandom has become increasingly centered around a handful of platforms. Tumblr would be one of them that I think a lot of people associate with fandom automatically. Some older ones would be fanfiction.net, LiveJournal, and Dreamwith, and more recently, the AO3. And what makes those platforms special is that their features are in some form well suited to fanish needs, which is the reasons fans tend to flock there. But the Archive of Our Own is a special case because it was designed by fans for fans, and on those other platforms you will either find other types of content as well, or in the case of fanfiction.net, that platform is commercially motivated. So you will run into ads there, and yeah, the advertisers didn't necessarily like that their content was being shown next to sexual works between 2 male characters, for example. So the AO3, because it was made by fans, was able to implement features specifically for fans to enjoy. And thus it was not only shaped by past experiences in fandom, because all of the people who were involved in creating the platform came to it with their own experiences in fandom from before, but it also shapes the future of fandom because it is now such a popular platform to the point of being the main platform and the point that a lot of people even come into fandom from. Yeah, so I noticed all of those things and became aware that the platform plays such a big role in shaping how fans produce content and interact with each other. So I then asked myself the following questions. What fan practices and forms of participation are produced by the features of the AO3? And what are the effects of this negotiation of fan identity on the resulting formation of fan communities? Yeah, so that's what I'm going to look at in this presentation. And I'm going to start by introducing you to some of the theories and concepts that shaped my analysis, followed by a bit about the history of the AO3, how the platform came to be, what motivated fans to make that sort of platform in the first place. And then I'm going to look at the relationship between fan practices and community formation by looking at 3 specific features where I think this is very obvious. Those features are the tagging system I've already mentioned, mechanisms of feedback giving on the platform, and yeah, why am I blanking on this now? That's nice. Do I have this? What did I? Tagging? Comment? No. We will get to that at some point. And then I'm going to summarize all my findings in my conclusion. Yeah, so in this part, I'm going to show you the concepts and theories underlying my analysis. And yeah, here I would like to ask you another question. So on this slide, you can see 2 very different approaches to culture, and I would like to ask you what you think the difference is between the things shown on those 2 sides. And maybe think about the role of yourself as a person in both of these cases. So imagine a hard line here in between the AO3 and the woman reading. What do you think is the difference between the things shown in the right-hand side and the left-hand side? Yeah?
I'd say on the left it's more participatory culture where you're actively involved, whereas on the right it's more passive and watching something and not being active part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was also thinking that this side is very much culturally appreciated and approved in going to the theatre and reading real books. And then on the other side you have people doing basically the same thing, but they're getting laughed at the Ren Fair or Fanfiction doesn't have a great reputation. So.
Yes, thank you. Both of those things are exactly right. And that's a really nice addition because that features heavily in my later explanation of those things. And it's very nice of you to point that out even now. And that was the main thing I was getting at this point. So, yeah, as you've suggested, the difference is in whether individuals other than the creator are involved in the production of the content itself, or whether they are just consumers. So, for example, on the right-hand side, you have a woman reading in a chair, or someone watching TV shows or movies via a streaming service, whereas on the other side you have the AO3, like I said, but also, for example, a woman giving an art class, I would assume. So, yeah, here we have, like I just said, someone passing along their knowledge of this type of cultural production to others. And yeah, this side of culture is a lot more participatory and less strict and finished. And yeah, there are 2 theories that come with that, which are called read-write culture and read-only culture, which come from the book Remix, Making Art and Commerce Thrive in the Hybrid Economy by Lawrence Lessig from 2005. And the example he uses is that of a composer in the early 20th century who fundamentally disagreed with the idea of there being automatic piano players that could play songs at you. So they wouldn't involve a person actively playing them, but the piano itself was able to replay certain songs that had been played onto them once. So the consumer, in that case, wouldn't be involved in creating the music. And this composer feared the death of the amateur and thought that mechanical music would create a cultural emptiness in which no one would be involved in creating their own content anymore, apart from a very select number of professionals. So those would then be at the top of a cultural monarchy, and the consumers would be completely passive. And the second type, as I've already said, is the read-write culture, which is a fundamentally different type of culture, and what this professional, even though he himself would have been at the top of this cultural monarchy, he didn't want that to be the case. He wanted everyone to be involved in the creation of cultural material, even if it wasn't necessarily good. So that wasn't what he was interested in. So the key difference I identified between those two types of culture from reading the book was where the means of cultural production lies. So in the case of the read-only culture, only a small minority even have access to the means of creating culture. And that access can be in the form of skills, because amateurs then wouldn't even acquire those skills if they are simply passive consumers, or also just access to, I don't know, pianos, art supplies, that sort of thing. And ordinary citizens would only acquire tokens of culture and consume cultural products. So for example, people would buy books, as you can see here, or go to concerts and spend money on that, but they wouldn't be involved in the production of that at all. So that, of course, is a very idealized form that you wouldn't be able to find in the world anywhere to such an extreme, but you do see it in a lot of places, even if it's not to the same extreme. And there would be a very clear distinction between artists and non-artists in this type, and we don't really see that to the same extent with the read-write culture. Again, you wouldn't necessarily find a culture where everyone is involved in the production of cultural or creative content, but in this case it is a lot more possible for the average person to do that. And Lessig, the author of this book, said that this was facilitated by an explosion of technologies for creating and distributing media. The distinction between amateurs and professionals in this case would still exist very much. Some people would create art in their free time, others would do it professionally and make money off of that, but both types of producers would have access to the same or similar tools in this case. This theory is still very generalized, but there is another one that focuses specifically on the internet, and I think you can see a very clear line between the two if you focus on the explosion of technologies part, because the internet made it possible for a lot more people to become themselves involved in cultural production and also in the sharing of it, because before the internet you could write a story, but you wouldn't have been able to necessarily share it with the same amount of people, unless maybe it was featured in some sort of newspaper, but even then not everyone would have been able to do that, and we would be back to a case where only a select few would have that privilege. Then on the internet that changed, and Tim O'Reilly identified that in his online essay, What is Web 2.0, in 2005. And that essay came to be about because he noticed a shift in how web applications functioned in around 2003. And he noticed that there was no longer a clear distinction between creators and consumers. So, for example, a lot of people were creating their own websites or adding content to existing platforms, and he quoted in this particular instance the term "we the media," which means that everyone, like I just said, is involved in that production, or at least has can make the choice to become involved, because the means of doing that are available to them. For example, today you will see a lot of free or very cheap video or picture editing programs. So even if you don't have Photoshop necessarily, or some sort of very professional video creation software that professionals would use, you would still be able to create videos, share any content you want pretty much, because what does cost money has gotten cheaper, and a lot of stuff doesn't cost money anymore. So the access to the means of cultural production has become a lot more egalitized, as you can see. And O'Reilly identified some core principles of what makes this Web 2.0 special. So he said that the web functions as a platform. That means that that's also another thing I've mentioned before, that companies provide not the content, but the infrastructure to create content on that. So that could be specific tools or a platform where people would come together and post stuff under the restrictions of that specific type of infrastructure. Like I said, Instagram, you have to post photos or videos or whatever on there. You can't just post a freestanding text unless you take a photo or a screenshot of that text and put it onto a picture. You can't just post text on its own. Or TikTok is very video focused, for example. So the platform places restrictions on you. And the second point is that this Web 2.0 targets the long tail of the web. That means that not everything is centered around a few very big websites like Facebook, but that people have alternatives and can create their own websites that don't have as many users, but it is still possible to post on there. And because the web has become decentralized and is less reliant on these big platforms, again, this is from the early 2000s, we have definitely seen a shift back into the direction of the web becoming more centralized, with everyone using social media a lot more than they would smaller platforms, and a lot of people not really growing up with the tools on how to do that and how to use the wider internet anymore. But in the early 2000s, O'Reilly said that the web served more as a portal to the collective work of the net's users, and people could, through links or Google, for example, access those smaller websites where individuals or smaller groups would create content, and not just the very big platforms with thousands or millions of people. And another thing that's similar between this and Lessig is that without users actively participating as creators in this type of cultural society, there wouldn't be any content. Again, if we take Instagram as an example, or Google would be another one, without users creating content, the platform would be completely empty. And that is also the case with the archive of our own. So the more people post on those platforms, the bigger and more attractive they become, because then people will have something to see on them. And you don't have to really like everything that's on there, but you will likely be aware that all of the content on there is shaped through the specific lens and infrastructure of that platform. Yeah. And another theory, the last one that takes us even closer to fandom, is this theory by Henry Jenkins of participatory culture. He is actually a fan studies researcher, whereas the other two were business focused. So they didn't really care about the users as much as they wanted to know how to still make money off of them in a world where people were creating their own content. But Jenkins was interested in media education, so he asked himself how people learn the skills necessary to be successful in a world where media is so important, and he realized that that place where people were doing that wasn't at school. And he identified online communities as a new sphere of learning, which was more effective in a lot of cases for the simple reason that he said that at school a lot of people wouldn't know why they were learning the things they were learning and thus wouldn't pay as much attention to them, simply because they weren't as invested and didn't see any immediate benefit from listening or applying themselves to the content there. And in the case of online communities, he said people will be a lot more invested in their learning outcomes because they will see an immediate use for what they are doing, or even learn things specifically so that they can become involved in specific communities. So for example, to use myself as an example again, I wouldn't be able to speak English the way I do now if I just learned it at school. And so I started reading fan fiction online at around the age of 11, 12, and noticed immediately that a lot of content, if not almost all of it, was in English, and it gave me a reason to not only pay attention in class, but to interact with English stuff outside of school pretty much all the time. And that's the case for a lot of people. As Henry Jenkins identified in 2006, 57% of teens who use the internet could be considered media creators. And those teens did a lot of different things on the internet, and he noticed that creative accomplishments in general were becoming more widespread. So for example, in my case, you would have writing again, but you could also create artworks or videos, or if you're not filming them, you could edit them, as I showed you in the example of that fan video at the beginning, or people were becoming web coders. That was another really common one, to create their own websites, or take on communal responsibilities like becoming an admin or moderator in some sort of online video game or a group chat. And he noticed all of that and asked himself what makes these communities so engaging to teens in particular. So this is a quote about what he identified, and he said, "For the moment, let's describe participatory culture as one with relatively low barriers to artistic expression and civil engagement, with strong support for creating and sharing one's creations with others, with some type of informal mentorship whereby what is known by the most experienced is passed along to novices, where members believe that their contributions matter, and where members feel some degree of social connection with one another, at least they care about what other people think about what they have created." So the difference is that there is a lot more of a culture in this case, and it is less linear and mentor-mentee focused the way you would see it in schools. So you wouldn't have some strict authority figure at the top making the decisions for everyone, but he said that everyone was actually involved in those communities and was there because they wanted to be there, not because they had to be, but because their interests aligned with what that community wanted, and so they decided to create stuff for that community as well to become involved, where again we see that practices play a very important part in those communities, rather than simply, I keep wanting to say existing together, but that's kind of what it is, what you don't do in those communities. You have to show your belonging in some form, he said. And I noticed that all of these things were very much the case in the archive of our own, because anyone with an internet connection could create an account in there, so the barriers to artistic expression and engagement are very low, which you can also see in the point that you could post pretty much anything on there as long as it's transformative. So if you're not a writer, you could still become part of the community as an artist, for example. And again, as I've already said, the platform would be empty without its users. So those creations that users post on there then lead to the formation of a community. And experienced fans model and explain their behavior to newcomers, which is how those social norms are passed on and the community continues to exist. And this is another really important point, that everyone serves a dual role as both a creator and a consumer of content, which leads to a sense of contribution. So for example, if you are in a fandom and you are new as a writer, depending on the size of the fandom, it is very likely that the person you have been admiring for years now will actually read what you have written. And you would then feel a bit starstruck, but yeah, the distinction and the hierarchy isn't really there to the same extent as if you were to write a book as a newcomer, you wouldn't really expect your favorite traditionally published author to read it. That's a big difference on those platforms. And yeah, people also care about what others have created because they all like the same thing and are in those communities to experience some sort of connection with them. And in order to achieve that, their content would have to be liked by others, so they care about what others think. Why that is the case, I'm going to explain that later, but basically the comments that people leave on AO3 are always positive. You wouldn't say something negative about something someone has created in their free time. That is part of the social norms that are passed on throughout the community. Now on to the part about the platform's history. To answer my first question, to see what it is that makes the AO3 so unique in that it is so capable of shaping what the entire fan community looks like and how it develops. The Archive of Our Own is the largest project of the non-profit organization, the Organization for Transformative Works, which was founded in 2007, and it's not the only project. They also have, like I said, that wiki of fan expressions. They also have an academic journal and a legal team. And so if someone were to, let's say Disney wanted all of their fan fiction to be taken down, the AO3 legal team would step up and defend the rights of those fans, even in the case of really, really big corporations. And that entire organization and the AO3 in particular was based on the LiveJournal post, an archive of one's own by Astolat. Astolat is the American author Naomi Novik, who amongst other things has written Uprooted and A Deadly Education, if you've heard of her. And she wrote that post in response to some precarious circumstances in fandom that she noticed, because there was no single acceptable platform that all fans felt like they could post their content on. Because all the platforms that existed that day, the big one being fanfiction.net, were heavily relying on advertising money because they weren't fan-made and the producers didn't have the interests of the fans at heart. So they couldn't just take those ads off the platform when the advertisers said that they didn't want their ads to stand beside queer or sexually explicit material, because without those ads, the platforms wouldn't have been able to survive. But queer and sexual stuff makes up a very big percentage of fan creations, because fans are very often people that don't really see themselves represented in mainstream media. Those may be, for example, queer people, people of color, disabled people, but also a very simple case is women, because a lot of the big characters in most TV shows are men. And if we take any big show like Supernatural, you will notice that the main characters have much stronger relationships with their male best friends than with the female love interest. And the love interest is often only there to serve as love interest, but has no personality or purpose outside of the men. But the men amongst themselves are a lot more fleshed out. So even if someone is a straight woman, they may become more interested in reading about two men in a relationship and are able to fantasize a lot more and feel themselves represented in that, because they don't have to worry about the inequalities they would possibly experience in female-male relationships or in the real world. Or another example would be porn, because in porn a lot of the time the focus isn't really on the pleasure of the woman, so for a lot of women that's not what they are interested in when they go to that sort of material for their pleasure. Yeah, and because that content was so popular and advertisers didn't want it on their platforms, a lot of fanish content would be deleted or entire websites would just be taken down completely. So Astolat, that author, came up with the solution of having a volunteer-run, non-profit archive funded by donations. So there would be no ads on that platform and no more bowing to advertisers, and everyone who works in that entire network of projects by the OTW, the Organization for Transformative Works, those are all volunteers. So the service people, the lawyers working for that, the academics writing papers for that journal, all of them are volunteers and doing that for their own enjoyment and because they are invested in the continued existence of fan communities and their specific content. And the AO3 has an open door policy, which means that nothing is taboo on the platform unless it is actually illegal in the United States. For example, underage content, that is one thing that a lot of people don't really like about the platform, but the AO3 states that fictional children in these situations don't harm real children. So unless the underage content on there is a video of two real children, that's not really underage content in the eyes of American law. And so that's what the AO3 adopts, because they said that as soon as you start banning certain content from the platform, you're right back in that rabbit hole where people get to decide what is and isn't acceptable, and not everyone, once again, would feel welcome on the platform. And because that content, that archive was created by fans, they could implement certain features that would be specifically tailored to the needs of fans. And that would provoke specific actions and set guidelines for posting, sharing, and evaluating fan works. So I noticed that there was a reciprocal connection between features and community formation in the case of the AO3 to an extent that you don't really see on a lot of other platforms. And yeah, the AO3 is synonymous with fandom at this point. It's a lot of younger people's in particular, first entry point to fandom. And that is even though the platform doesn't have profiles or a messenger service or forums. So you can't really interact with people on there outside of the context of fan works. So you can comment on people's works and talk about other stuff on there as well. So sometimes conversations will develop, but you can't just message someone outside of that. And yeah, I noticed that something about the AO3 must shape fan communities. And that is why I came up with this paper, and the specific features that do that are what I will be looking at in the next section. Yeah, the first feature I will be looking at is tagging, which again you could see at the beginning of the presentation, which I think, yeah, here's an example. Underneath the title and above the summary, you would have a block of tags that tell you what is inside that work, what happens in it. But that tagging system didn't come out of nowhere, but it is based on two existing systems that come together in this case. The first one being called the traditional taxonomy system, in which terms are prescriptively applied to existing content. This is what you would get if you were to go into a library and go to the medicine section. So those would be very broad category terms without any major details given, just the very broad basic category. And the categories would already exist in the library, unless maybe someone were to suddenly acquire 100 books about a category they didn't have before. It would probably be unlikely that someone would just see one book and begin a new category for it. So the categories exist first, and then the content would be put within those categories. The other big system is the folksonomy system. That's also what O'Reilly wanted to use in the platforms that support the new Web 2.0, in which users pick freely chosen keywords and can tag their works as anything they want. One example, again, would be that on Instagram you will often see very long blocks of tags underneath posts, sometimes even in the comments if they would be too long to put into the main description of the post. And those are also often unclear. So for example, a lot of people will tag their selfies as me, which in this case doesn't mean a specific person anymore, it's just anyone taking a selfie. And also a lot of people may have to use tons of tags that are just slightly different, like a singular and a plural form of a certain word to get their content seen, because people, when looking for content in this case, type any word into the search function and will then only be shown the words that use that keyword. And the AO3 combines those two types to keep the benefits of both, which is that in the case of the folksonomy, the users can decide what their works are tagged as, but you can also still search for them pretty easily. And that's done through a system called curated folksonomy or tag wrangling. And that means that volunteers who help out at the AO3 will go through every single tag that a person posts on the website and see if it aligns with anything that someone else has posted before. So if someone were to use the tag kissing, but another person used making out, they would then link those two things together so that people searching for only one of those terms would be shown the results for both. So in this case, there is a reciprocal link between the categories and the content. This is an example of what some of those tags look like. And because people can type in their own tags without them being matched, so not everything gets matched always. If something doesn't really matter to the plot, it won't be matched, but it will still be visible on the work in the blocks of tags. You can also slip some personal information in there because of that. So for example, too much historical research, but other things are more filterable, I guess. So usually those tags that are capitalized, those are things that you can search for. And they can be very general, like for example, Game of Thrones or Doctor Who. Or they can be very specific up to the point of Ted Lasso's canonically huge dick, which means that that tag has been used by so many people that the tag wranglers decided it was worth making it searchable, so that you could sort all of the works on the entire archive by that tag and be shown every work that uses it, even though it's very specific. So in that way, the creation of tags is very dynamic. Things like, for example, Game of Thrones would be more likely to have already existed at some point because that's an existing show, but the canonically huge dick tag, that's something that users would have to come up with on their own over time. Yeah, and those canonical tags, those are the ones that are capitalized, are ones that help users filter works that they want to see based on themes or genres or specific events in the canon of the fandom world. Anything they want to read about, you can search for, and maybe it will be tagged. So not everyone tags their fics or fan works in general as everything. You could just leave out some things, for example, to avoid spoilers, or you might not think of anything. So in that way, it is still up to the writer themselves whether they tag something or not. And freeform tags are ones that provide additional information and maybe display little bits of the author's personality. So they aren't really necessary, but they are more chatty and make the author look more approachable. And this also, in my opinion, emphasizes a lot more that the author and their readers are both fans and are both interested in the community, and that the author is not some big authority who decides everything. So if someone were to put, in this case, rainy nights on the sofa, which is one of the lowercase ones, into the tags, that is something a little more personal that you wouldn't be able to filter, but that tells the reader something about the author. And this combination of those two things wouldn't be possible without tag wrangling, so the system is built to inherently include human labor in it. You couldn't just get that at this point, at least not just through a computer. Yeah, and on the side, which I may or may not have another, nope. You hopefully remember the block of the gray search bar on the right-hand side of the AO3 screenshot. This is what happens when you click on the additional tags sub-menu within that block. You will then be shown the most common tags that are used within a specific fandom. In this case, the fandom is Our Flag Means Death, which is a TV show on HBO, I think, in the US, about gay pirates. And yeah, those tags, they aren't set by the platform or the tag wranglers. They organically develop because they are the ones that people use the most. So that can reflect trends or interests or common themes within the community. For example, works that are tagged as fluff, that means usually that something is lighthearted and happy and not necessarily not traumatic or very dark, for example. But then we also have angst, which is the more dramatic stuff, post-canon, which means works that are set after the source material has ended, so stuff that happens after what happens in the show itself. And yeah, tag wrangling even enables fandoms to develop their own tags. Again, an example would be Ted Lasso's canonically huge dick, but also Blackbeard loves Steve Bonnet. Those are characters from that specific TV show, and you wouldn't get that without those characters existing without that show. Whereas tags such as established relationship, meaning that the characters are together already in a relationship at the point the work is set, those are things you could just use in the same wording in any other fandom. And by using those more specific tags, like here, Steve Bonnet loves Blackbeard, Edward Teach, those can be used to demonstrate your belonging to the community. Because you know what trends exist within it, and thus others who know those too would be more likely to read your stuff. The second big thing I wanted to talk about, the mysterious one I forgot earlier, is the aspect of gift giving on AO3. And for that I have a very small quote, which says, the majority of the internet's updaters, those who create new content for websites, continually renewing interest in them and keeping them fresh, are unpaid. This is true for both Wikipedia, for example, and can't use eBay in that example. Google, no. Wikipedia, and also fannische creations. Instagram, again. Most people posting on Instagram don't get paid for it, even though influencers do exist. Most people don't get paid, but the worth of the platform and your interest in it still increases, even though they don't get paid. And that's also the case in fannische communities. But what's special about AO3 is that they noticed that the platform would benefit from it if you could also dedicate individual fan works to individual people, instead of them just being gifts to the entire fan community. There is a fun Tumblr quote about this, where the user Matt Queen Sarah said, "I love how when fan fiction writers have friends in the fandom to demonstrate their friendship, they dedicate porn to one another." I think that's lovely. And as this quote emphasizes, the gift giving in the case of AO3 is often done to demonstrate the friendship among users. They don't have to be authors necessarily. You could also gift something to someone who has never posted before. And this is an inherent part of the platform. So in this case, if we look at this work, you have underneath the title and the person's username, you have the person it is gifted to. So in this case, the work was written by Dispatch 22705 and gifted to Rosita LG. And if you were to go to Rosita's profile, you would then see that work linked there. Underneath the person's own works, you always have a section of the gifts they receive, and that lets you see some sort of networks of friendship and community between individual users. And from that, I deduced that fandom both fosters and benefits from gift giving, because it means that there are more works on the platform, as I've already said, but also this leads to more feedback and gives you more of an incentive to keep creating, because the community aspect is very important here, and if you give something to someone, they are very likely to comment on it, as are their friends, for example. Or if you write something based on a specific idea that someone had, people who also like that idea will be very likely to then comment on it. And it thus contributes to keeping the platform alive and increases the value not just of the platform, but of the individual community, because people already in there will be inspired to stay if people keep creating things, for example, based on discussions, and others will see that the community is alive and well, maybe more interested in maybe even consuming the source material, because sometimes people do select what they're going to watch or read based on how active the fan community is, for example, or the reputation of the fan community. And that can contribute to that happening. And also because there is no monetization on AO3, like I said, you can't make money off your works. This is one of the few ways you could also give back to, for example, a creator whose works you really enjoy, and for those people who are gifted the works, commenting on them is one of the only way they can really thank them, apart from maybe spreading the word that this work exists on other platforms or recommending it in their own, in the notes of their own works. But you can't give anyone money for that. And that leads us into the third big point, which is feedback giving. And once again, I'm going to begin with a quote. There has been a long-standing practice for fan fiction authors to receive help or ask for assistance from others with their fiction, whether they need assistance with plot development, characterization, background information about the fandom, or a simple grammar and spelling review. Assistance is provided through a system called beta reading. However, betas are not the only reviewers of fan fiction. Readers also regularly comment on stories' plot, content, and writing style. More, the comment section on a fic can provide new insight into the writing process that readers may not get in formal education. Again, here we have the aspect of education, that people will give each other feedback, tell each other how to create works that others will enjoy. And you can see the benefit of what you have done directly, because others who actually care about the content are commenting on what you have created, and this is maybe a bit more direct than if a teacher was giving you feedback for an essay, for example, because it's not just about how you did, but how others received it, how your content affects the community and your relationship with that person, maybe. So yeah, the two forms, as I've highlighted here, are beta reading and commenting. This is what a comment section may look like. The quote did say that people would sometimes leave more detailed comments. Again, they are almost always positive, but for example, you could say that the character development in this and this work was particularly well done, but a lot of them are also very simple, like, lovely, or, oh, flippy stomach feels. This one's a little bit more specific. I don't know how you pack so much immersion into each short figlet, but they are so evocative and moving and amazing. And another specific one, I like the image of of a half-asleep Jack asking, the image of a half-asleep Jack asking what she's doing is so beautiful, and her reply just heavenly. So those are slightly more specific, but they're not really full analyses or detailed descriptions of how you could improve your work. That is something you will find a lot more with beta reading. Beta reading means that before the work is posted, because here in the comment section, that is publicly available, nice echo, I could give you the link to this work and you would be able to see those comments on there on the internet. Beta reading, on the other hand, is private, so that is feedback that you would entrust someone from within the community usually to give you before you post the work. And yeah, you wouldn't give it to everyone, maybe a few people who you think are good writers, for example, or who you trust to tell you whether the character development, writing style, whatever is well done, and they would provide actual constructive criticism with the goal of improving the work. Whereas comments, like I said, are consistently positive because they are the sole form of compensation that people will receive. You can ask for criticism in the author's notes on your work, and people may give it, but unless someone explicitly does that, people say that it's rude to provide it, because a very common metaphor in fandom is that of cake. So, for example, if people were to write two people were to write something very similar, you wouldn't necessarily say, I'm only going to read this one, it's so great, and now I never want to look at this thing again. But you would interpret it as, this person has baked one cake, this person has baked another cake, I like them both, I'm going to eat them both. And you wouldn't tell someone that the icing on this one cake is bad if they gave it to you for free, for example. So that is how people will react if you give them negative comments. You will be called out for it a lot of the time if the person didn't ask for it. And it's also, in the same vein, considered rude to ask someone to make more. You can encourage them, of course, nicely by saying something nice, but if someone were to give you a free cake, you wouldn't just say without anything else, give me another one. Yeah, that's a very common metaphor in fandom. But both of those types, beta reading and comments, emphasize and contribute to the low participation threshold. You could see earlier, because beta reading helps achieve a higher quality, which in turn ensures that the person is more likely to receive more comments, which increases the likelihood of community bonds, because those comments, like the posting of the work itself, is another practice through which the community is formed. And beta reading in particular is how fandom conventions are passed on to newcomers in a lot of ways. It's not the only form, of course. You can also watch the way someone leaves comments and learn from that. But in the case of characterization or how a certain character is viewed by the community. You wouldn't necessarily have to write it the exact same way, but it would be one way to ensure that more people maybe like it than if it is considered to be wildly out of character for that person. And again, in this case, we see the informal mentorship that Jenkins mentioned above, and comments are also one of the reasons people care about what others think of their creations, because that is how you will know that someone enjoyed your work. Yeah, those are the three big practices that I wanted to show you today, and all of them shape how fans interact with each other and how fan communities are formed, because the platform, the AO3, through different ways provides the infrastructure through which this can be done. So the comment section exists, the tags exist on the platform. In the case of beta reading, you would maybe in your author's notes say thank you to this and this person for beta reading it, which again would be a bit like a seal of approval from that person. And so those things all channel users' interactions on the platform with one another in a specific direction. And that is how the platform directly shapes how fan communities are formed. And with that, we have almost reached the end of my lecture, and now I will just briefly summarize my findings in conclusion. So, I noticed through my analysis that, my analysis emphasized once again something I already knew, which is that fandom is inherently social, and that an essential part of being a fan is interacting with others in some form, and in this case, that form is transformative works. But the AO3 doesn't stand alone. It stands within a long line of historical fandom practices. In the case of transformative works, that line would maybe begin with Star Trek, but it's also what happened in the Star Trek fandom based on Sherlock Holmes, for example, which is one of the really early ones where even there people would come together and discuss what was happening in the books, which I think were published in a serialized form in newspapers at the very beginning. Yeah, so all of that, you can still find traces of that in the AO3 and how it is built. And because the focus of the AO3 and of the Organization for Transformative Works is on, like I said, transformative works, in the case of AO3, the community formation happens through shared practices that foster the community. And the AO3 was built specifically with this in mind, and as such has features that encourage community formation around fan works as opposed to randomly talking to each other in group chats or messenger services. It's all about the fan works and the shared practices that come with them. Other discussions do occur, of course, but the ones that I just mentioned, but that would be on separate platforms, like for example Tumblr, or separate servers like Discord servers or Slack in the case of some other fandoms, and that's an issue if you think about the historical preservation of fan content, because a lot of those discussions are then lost, whereas on the AO3, which sees itself not as a social media platform but as an archive, those things will be preserved forever, both the works and the comments or tags or whatever, unless the person specifically decides to delete them. They wouldn't just disappear because a certain time has passed or that sort of thing. Yeah. And the very big conclusion and the thing I took away from all of this is that the AO3 thus functions as a medium in two senses. The first sense is that it is a platform that connects fans of a franchise with one another, providing tools to find content. But again, there is no algorithm, So the works will be chronological, and the tagging is very important because users are responsible for finding their own content. And the lack of an algorithm is the other big thing that identifies the platform as not a social media website, but as an archive. You can come to other people for recommendations, for example, or people will make posts with recommendations on other websites like Tumblr. But it's like you can't just go to a library and the library won't tell you, read this based on your interests automatically. That's not how it works. There has to be a person behind it. And the other big sense in which it is a medium is that it serves as a hub for the transmission of fannish practices, like I said multiple times. So newcomers' first experience with fandom as a whole is very often this platform, and experienced fans' behavior will provide the guidelines for this platform. And as such, it channels practices into one place from which further development can occur. So of course, the AO3 isn't going to be the very last step in the development of fandom. It has now been around since 2009, and other things are definitely coming in some form. A very big thing shaping fandom now is TikTok, but again, those people often come there through the lens of AO3, maybe talk about it on TikTok, but yeah, it's very much not the end, and the history of fandom will continue to evolve in ways we can't really foresee at this point. It's just that the AO3 provides one big cornerstone of that history, and the things it has already achieved cannot really be taken back anymore because it is so important to the community. Yeah, with that, we have reached the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?